annual One Book, Two Book, and it would not be possible without the efforts and support of many people. The Community Foundation of Johnson County provided support through a fund created there by Carolyn Brown and Jerry Zimmerman. They are here tonight. Would you please stand? We'd like to recognize you for your generosity. Thank you both. Others who provide support include ACT, US Bank, Daydreams Comics, and Iowa Public Radio. We also receive support from an anonymous family foundation. Now, I would like to introduce you to John Kenyon, who is the Executive Director of the City of Literature organization. John?
All right, well, thank you very much, Jim. So I would also like to take a moment to thank some of the people whose work made the festival possible. So first, again, thanking Carolyn Brown, who is with us here tonight, as well as Tim Terry and Joshua Schamberger, who are not. They were members of the board of the City of Literature and helped to establish this festival at the outset 6 years ago. So I'd very much like to thank you for your efforts. The festival committee, especially our friends in the children's departments of the Iowa City, Coralville, and North Liberty libraries, were instrumental in bringing this together, while the United Way, which helped with volunteer recruitment and management, was a key partner. I also would like to offer a special thank you to the participating schools, particularly the teacher librarians who do amazing work to help us get word out about this, and the principals, as well as the classroom teachers who encourage their students to submit writing to the festival. And a special thank you to Denise Remke, who cannot be with us tonight, with the Iowa City Community School District, who is really a key person in helping us to get word out in the district. And last but certainly not least, I would like to thank the team from ACT that evaluated the more than 800 submissions of writing that we had for the festival this year. We have the team over here from ACT, and I would like to thank them for doing this so efficiently and quickly and wonderfully. So help me to thank ACT for that. So what sets this festival apart is that it's not only a celebration of writing for kids, but it's a celebration of writing by kids. As I mentioned, we had nearly 800 students from throughout the corridor that submitted work this year for the festival. We will recognize some of those students on Sunday for their excellence, and some of those kids are in the room here tonight with us as well. But we start the process of recognizing our young student writers tonight. So we asked our friends at ACT, who evaluated these pieces, to select one student to represent each of the 22 elementary schools in the Iowa City area. And so consider this a special prize above and beyond those that we're giving out on Sunday. So once our students read, they're going to come off the stage on this side, and they are going to receive a certificate as well as a gift certificate to Prairie Lights. Because of our generous sponsors for the festival, we are able to give that gift certificate to Prairie Lights to every one of the students that wins an award this weekend. So now, to help us introduce our young readers, I have two key members of Iowa City's literary community on hand. And first up is Joe Tiefenthaler. Joe is Executive Director of Film Scene and Associate Programming Director with the Mission Creek Festival. And Joe is in charge of the amazing literary lineup for that festival, and hopefully you've had a chance to check that out, and we'll have a chance to go see those wonderful authors in early April when the festival happens. So now I'd like to ask Joe to join me up here on the stage. And you can help me welcome him as well.
This event is incredible. I've had so much fun coming back here for, I think, year 3 now. There are still pieces that stick with me over time. I can still vividly remember a poem from 3 years ago of a kid kicking a soccer goal. These pieces matter. I cannot believe 800 submissions to just find the work that we'll be introducing here tonight and you'll be reading from. To have that recognition and the voice from such a thing as the UNESCO City of Literature office. This is a really incredible evening. Kids, your writing is incredible. Thank you for letting me read your work. And not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but one line really stuck with me. You'll hear this throughout the course of the evening. Your contribution could help dramatically no matter how small it is. These are very short pieces. This is a quick sort of overview of the talent that Iowa City has, not just at the workshop, not just through university or community programs. This is incredible writing from kids from all across this area, and they're unbelievably second through fifth graders. So it's a pleasure. Thank you, John, for asking me back to do this. And to kick everything off, first up, we have Sylvia Broffett, who's a third grader at Horn Elementary. She'll be coming up here to read her piece titled "The Fish and the Duck."
The Fish and the Duck. There once was a duck who loved to swim. The duck loved to eat fish, which was very strange. All the duck's friends told him over and over, "We do not eat fish," but he kept on eating fish. By the way, the duck's name was Aja. One day, Aja was swimming and a small fish popped out of the water. This was strange because Aja thought all the fish would swim away from him so they would not get eaten. Aja was confused. Then the fish said, "My name is Konala, and you leave us fish alone, or you will be sorry." Then Konala swam away as fast as she could. Aja thought, "A little fish can't stop me." Then he flew in the direction the fish had swam. As Aja was flying, he noticed that the water was getting a little wild. A little farther up, rapids were rolling over rocks. "This is wrong. I must have made a mistake because the fish do not live in dangerous water like this." Aja looked back. There's a small stream going off the river. That is the way the fish went, I am certain. Aja flew back and followed the small stream. Then a big fish jumped out of the stream and said, "I'm guardian of the fish. You can call me Minijun. I'm wondering who you are and what you are doing here." Aja was frozen. Then he said, "Aja?" Minijun yelled, "You are Aja? I have heard of you. You must leave right away." "I won't," said Aja. Then Aja flew up into the sky. He flew up and up. Then he started to dive down. All the fish screamed, "He's acting like a peregrine falcon." Aja liked the sound of that, but he did not know that a big tiger shark was down in the water. When Aja skimmed the water, the tiger shark leaped out of the water. When Aja flew back and saw more tiger sharks gathering up. Then Aja flew up as high as he could. He found himself in a flock of crows. One came to him and said, "I'm Orlin. We are here to take you to a place with no fish, and you cannot escape from there." Aja wondered how the crows would take him away, but suddenly he felt dizzy with swirls of black in his mind from the crows flying around him. He got carried away to the desert with no fish. No one happens what happened to Aja. But when he got carried away to the desert, maybe he still lives there, or maybe he found a way out. I doubt that he still lives there because I've never seen a duck in the desert.
Never seen a duck in the desert. I love how the other animals, which include smaller fish, guardian fish, big fish, tiger sharks, looking like peregrine falcon. This is a one-page story with a huge range and scope in this sweeping landscape of going through rivers, over land, flying up high into the air. This was so much fun to read. Thank you, Sylvia, for the work. Next up, the second author this evening is Sienna Brown, who's a third grader from Mann Elementary, reading her piece, Scarlet.
Scarlet. Once there was a girl named Scarlet. She lived in a small village near the sea with her dad and her cousin Meg. Every day she would walk with her cousin along 5 miles to and from school. Scarlet enjoyed riding her horse and some of her chores, like feeding the horses and cows. In her village, traditionally only men could compete in horse riding. When a girl would ride, she would have to ride with both legs on one side. Girls could never compete. Scarlet thought that was most certainly unfair. She decided to try to enter the horse riding competition. She practiced. When she had school, she rode her horse along 5 miles to school. People pointed at Scarlet, but she did not care. Every day people pointed at her, but that did not stop Scarlet's determination. It actually helped make Scarlet more determined. Soon people stopped laughing at Scarlet. Over time, they got used to seeing Scarlet ride with one leg on each side. One morning, several days before the competition, Scarlet woke up to the sunlight shining through the window. She looked out the window and there was ice everywhere. She ate breakfast and got dressed and got on her horse. She rode to school. As she rode, the horse slipped on the ice and she fell off. Her friend's mom saw her and helped her pick herself up. She told Scarlet that her arm was broken. Scarlet was very worried. The competition was that very Friday. Scarlet hoped she could ride with one arm. If not, she would try again next year. That Friday morning, her dad said she could try to compete. When she got to the competition, there were so many people. Her dad said there was normally 100 men there. She was very nervous. When they told Scarlet to come up, her arm was trembling in her cast. She was told that she would have to get her horse to go up to 30 miles per hour. The fastest Starlight, her horse, had ever gone was 31 miles per hour. She hoped she could ride with only one arm to hold on with. Starlight at first went 22 miles per hour, then 29. Then, wait, it went 30 miles per hour. Scarlet felt proud of herself and her horse. When the judges gave the awards out, Scarlet was in second place. That night, as she rode home with her dad, she felt more brave than ever before. She decided not to give up. She would ride again next year. The end.
I'm personally terrified of horse riding, let alone doing it with a broken arm. Sienna, I have a movie idea for you. Go watch a film. It came out last year. It's called The Eagle Huntress. It's about a Mongol. Yeah. Okay, awesome. You're on it. All right, let's keep this going. Our third reader of the night is going to read her piece called Zoe's Lucky Day. She's a second grader at Hoover Elementary. Adelaide Capps.
One day Zoe was washing her cat. Her mom said, "Do you need glasses, honey?" as she poured maple syrup on her cat. She was doing a good job until that particular day. Zoe's mom thought Zoe needed to go to the eye doctor, but Zoe said no. They went to the eye doctor anyway. Zoe got her eyes checked. The eye doctor said she needed glasses. They were blue with pink stripes. On the walk home, Zoe found a lucky penny. She wished she never had glasses. It worked, but she was back where she was before she started wearing glasses. The next morning, she was eating breakfast when she poured ketchup on her pancakes.
So I was reading that one the other night as friends were trying to watch television, and I ruined everything they were watching during a very serious moment because of the poured maple syrup on her cat. But the character who didn't want glasses but wouldn't have seen the penny without them used that to wish them back away and just totally enjoys life as it is. That's awesome. Okay, next up is Brooke Chandler, who's a fourth grader at Borlaug Elementary. She will be reading her piece, A Stinky Situation.
A stinky situation. When my parents announced, guess what? We're going on a trip to Colorado. I got super excited. So did Ryan. Caroline, not so much. Why do we have to go to Colorado? Caroline asked as we got in the interstate. Are you too excited? Asked Mock, ignoring Caroline's question. Caroline frowned. Yeah, Ryan and I answered, because we get to go camping, Ryan said. I nodded. Who in their right minds would want to go camping? Caroline flailed her arms around. Because, Ryan said, it's fun. Caroline cocked her head like a confused pigeon. I still don't get it, Caroline grumbled. I heard Mom and Dad sigh. I felt like sighing too, but I knew Caroline would scold me. Ding, an idea poured into my head. There's lots of shopping in Colorado, I began. Caroline's eyes have widened. Okay, she hummed before I got the chance to finish. One day later. We're here, cheered Ryan. Caroline and I groaned. It was such a long drive. I yawned. Well, we'll pitch a tent and then go right to bed, Dad assured us. I woke up early the next morning. Rise and shine, everyone, I called out, slapping and banging pots and pans together to create a loud noise. I took note. Pots and pans. Cause. Banging and slapping. Effect. A grumpy family. Oh, come on, moaned Caroline. Rookie, Ryan tugged on my tank top. Okay, I'm sorry, I laughed. Everyone gave me a tired look. What? I said. Suddenly, out of nowhere, some spiders fell out at me. Ah! I yelled. Ron and Caroline burst into laughter. Hey, I frowned. Even Mom and Dad started to laugh as well. I had to take a bath in tomato juice. In a barrel. I will never forget that moment.
I have seen way too many adult authors who cannot read that good. I would never have known what this was before until I read the story and heard her read it. Caroline cocked her head like a confused pigeon. I know exactly what that is. I never would have said it before. And something makes me believe that, Brooke, you probably banged on pots and pans and woke everybody up. Did you do that? Just saying. You would? Okay, I just wanted... next up, we have Ruby Frank, who is a 5th grader at Penn Elementary. She'll read her piece, The Wolf of Wishes.
The forest can be a beautiful place, but it can also be a place of fear. A young girl the age of 12 went out to find food in the forest. Her name was Alana. It was sunset, and she was heading to her house when she heard a howl. She could tell it was a wolf. Alana ran, but she ran toward the howl. She came to a stop. A beautiful white wolf was drinking at the creek. The wolf didn't know that Alana was there. Alana was behind a large rock watching the wolf. The wolf looked up and saw Alana. The wolf charged her and she ran. She looked back and saw that the place where she had been was covered in rocks. Alana realized that the wolf had saved her life. The wolf was gone now, and was gone. The wolf was gone now, and was nowhere in sight. Alana went back to her house. It was a teepee made of buckskin. Her mother and father had died when she was 10. Alana made herself supper. As she ate, she thought about the wolf. She wondered where it had gone. She decided that tomorrow she would find it. The next morning, Alana went out with steer meat. She went back to the spring. Alana found the wolf. It was slowly creeping towards her. It smelled her hand and took the meat. After it devoured it, the wolf came and sat by her. Alana found the wolf licking her face. Alana told the wolf that she wished she had enough room for the wolf to come live with her. She went to her house with the wolf, and Alana's house was 3 times as big as it was before she left. Alana realized that the wolf was magic. It would grant her wishes. Alana became known as the Wolf Girl. She never aged since she met the wolf, and the wolf became known as the Wolf of Wishes. If you go to the forest and you hear a howl, consider going towards it. You may just run into Alana and the Wolf of Wishes.
Ruby, I hope you write more of those scenes in the wishes. I feel like there's a lot here with the Wolf of Wishes. I'm also curious, if you ever start a band, you have to call it Wolf Girl. please. Next up, we have David Guliuzza, who's a 5th grader at Lucas Elementary. He'll be reading his piece called Emma's Dream.
Chapter 1. I heard my mom call time for bed. I crawled under my covers and went to sleep. Then I found myself in a garden. It had all sorts of flowers I had never seen before. Then I saw a little man with a bushy beard come down from the steps leading from his house. He yelled, "Get out of my garden, you hatred human." "Oh, sorry," I quivered. "I didn't mean to yell," replied the dwarf. "We were just mad from the witch sending her minions to destroy our village. I thought you were one of them." "Would you like to see our village?" he asked. "Sure," I exclaimed. Chapter 2. So here's the sleeping quarters where the houses are. Here's the town square, said the dwarf. In front of us is the cafe, and to the left is the castle, and to the right is the blacksmith office. Where does that path lead? I asked. To the wizard's tower, he replied. Speaking of him, it's almost dinner and you can't fit in our cafe. We better ask him for a shrink potion. Chapter 3. Hello, I said the wizard. He was much shorter than I thought and had a long beard that trailed behind him. So what can I do for you? He asked. We need a shrink potion for our guest. What's your name again? He whispered to me. Emma, I whispered back. Emma, said the dwarf. The wizard gave us a potion and said it won't last long, but here. I thanked him and we left. Chapter 4. The cafe smelled delicious. We sat down and I asked him what his name was. He replied, it's Garrett. When we were leaving, I noticed my shoe was untied. I bent down to tie it and I grew huge, and my stomach ached. I thought it was because I ate too much, but then I grew huge. Well, it felt huge because I had been tiny for a while. At least all Garrett had to do was walk up to the tower and come back. A few minutes later, he came back and said, the wizard said this potion will last longer. I drank it and grew tiny again. Chapter 5. All of a sudden, I felt thumping and I saw a whole lot of monsters that had to be the witches came over the hills. All the dwarves dashed to the blacksmith office to get armor and weapons. The wizard's tower roof opened and a big cannon came out. It shot a blue liquid that probably was the shrink potion because it made all the minions shrink to dwarf size. All the dwarves ran into battle. The wizard called me up to his tower and gave me a red potion. It made me big again. He gave me armor and a magic sword. What's this for? I asked. You will fight the witch, the wizard replied. What? I can't fight the witch. Chapter 6. The dwarves were taking care of the minions while I fought the witch. She knocked me down a few times and sent a rock at me, and I fell back and I could not get up. She was about to strike me with magic lightning when the wizard jumped in front of me and deflected it. The lightning shot back her and struck her. The witch tumbled to the ground and the wizard helped me up. The witch shot fire at us. I raised my sword and blocked the fire. I raised my sword again, but over my head and swung toward the ground. A fire flashed toward her. The witch yelled, no, and turned into a pile of ashes. The minions retreated to the hills and the dwarves threw a party. I heard someone saying my name. I thought it was a dwarf, but then I realized it was my mom. Chapter 7. I woke up and my mom said to hurry or I would miss the bus. I got dressed and went downstairs for breakfast. At breakfast, I told my mom about my dream.
So that was awesome. Not only within these short chapters did Emma go from huge to tiny to huge to tiny to huge again, but also these incredibly hospitable dwarves who take the care to get their guest the tiny potion. Also, shortly thereafter, just in battle, wielding swords. That was fantastic. Our next young author is Jael Herrera, a 4th grader at Twain Elementary, who will be reading his piece, The Mexico Waves.
When I was in Mexico, I went to the beach. I saw a big wave. I ran and jumped like a dolphin swimming beautiful. Big waves were crashing on me as the salt water covered me. It was noiseless underwater. It felt like lots of water was using force and bringing me back to shore. I opened my eyes and saw the sunlight. I ran back in the waves. Nothing was distracting me. It felt like a dream with water covering me as I went for shore. Something big and strong was behind me. I was trying to run, but I was too late. It already covered me, but this wave was stronger than any wave. I was panicking underwater, thinking in my head, what do I do? What do I do? The wave was pulling me back. I thought it was over. I was wrong. My back was cracked. I thought it was over. My head thinking, where am I? Opening my eyes, seeing the sun like it was right in front of me. My mom holding me. I didn't breathe. All I wanted to do was sit on shore, not thinking about anything, not looking, but I survived.
Child, those are 3 really tense paragraphs. I was worried. Our next author is Caden Huntley, 4th grader at Willowwind, who will read his piece, Journey on the Prairie.
Journey on the Prairie. Hi, my name is Caleb. My friends, David and Mag, and I love to go on adventures. This will be our biggest one yet. We're going to explore the new Iowa Territory prairie. The year is 1835. Everyone in town comes to say goodbye because we would be gone for a while. The next day, we cross the Mississippi River into the Iowa Territory in a canoe. Then we hike. We hike all day long. Finally, we get into the prairie. There are rolling hills with grass as far as the eye can see. We can barely see each other, and the grass is so tall. That night, when sunset falls, we set up our camp next to a bur oak tree. In the morning, the noise of animals wakes us up. The weather is chilly today. It is fall, and that worries me. Winter is coming soon. We have to prepare. I recall my grandma saying, in the wild you can conquer anything. We set out to find food. Then we see the animals. Lots of them. A herd of bison is nearby. Near the bison, a flock of prairie chickens away and ducks fly over. We decide to hunt the bison because we can use it for a lot of things. We managed to kill a bison. We use the fur to make a warm blanket and dry the meat to last a long time. A gush of cold air sweeps past us. That was just another sign that winter is going to start soon. We return to our camp and go to sleep. The next day, snow starts to fall. It is winter now. We really have to think about how to survive. Our teeth chatter as the temperature drops to -10 degrees. We eat some bison and find that our water is frozen. We have to break the ice. We put a chunk of ice in our mouths and it melts. We write in our journals for the next few days. Then one day we realize we are running low on food. Likely we will be out by the next day. A blizzard is coming, but I am forced to go out and hunt anyway. I kill some prairie chickens and head back to camp. With the blinding snow and the tall grass, I can't see where I am going. A huge blast of snow overtakes me. Everything goes black. The last thing I see is our camp in the distance. Caleb, I open my eyes. David is calling my name. I'm lying face down in the snow. I force myself up. David, I scream. A figure outlined in the snow comes toward me. David helps me to my feet and we walk to the camp. Mag is there. She gives me some food and I scarf it down. We've been looking for you for days, Mag explains. We don't have any food or water. I have a little left over from what I killed when I was gone, I say. We cook one of the prairie chickens. The next day, the blizzard has passed. Over a few days, the snow melts and we are able to go out hunting. We find a bison and kill it. For the next week, we eat as we've never eaten before. We decide we need to head home. When we have enough energy, we pack up everything and start walking. We pass the border of the Iowa Territory, and this time we cross the Mississippi River on foot over the ice. Finally, we see our town in the distance. As we begin walking up the main street, a huge crowd gathers. Everyone screams in joy when they see us. It turns out they thought we were dead. We share what we wrote in our journals while we were gone.
Everyone found it very interesting and thought we should let the governor of our state know about it. We traveled to the state capitol and met with him. He said we had discovered very interesting information and asked if we would go out to a new territory. We said we would consider it, but knew we would have to be better prepared for winter. Years have passed since we had these adventures, but now I know what my grandma was right when she said, in the wild, you can conquer anything.
Kate, I want to know about that next journey. The next one, are you going to write that? Maybe. All right, can you let us know how that finishes? There's a long tradition of that historical prairie fiction throughout the Midwest and settling lands that you're feeding into. I don't know if the age range is appropriate for some of the titles, but like later on in like 6 years, I've got a book list for you. Our next reader is Kenton Huynh, a 4th grader at Coralville Central Elementary.
Narrator. There was once a boy who had a pet parrot named Sammy. Boy. Say, Polly, want a cracker? Parrot. Sammy, want a donut? Boy. No. Polly, want a cracker? Parrot. Sammy, want a donut? Boy. Why aren't you saying Polly, want a cracker? Parrot. Because my name is Sammy, and I want a donut. Narrator. So the boy brought Sammy a cracker and a donut. Boy. Which one do you want? Parrot. I want a cupcake.
Kenton, I'm feeling that parrot. I want a cupcake. And I want you to keep writing. The comedy in that is incredible. It's so quick and so smart. Our next author is Reese Long, who is a 5th grader at Van Allen. He'll be reading his piece, Dragon Fighter. Reese.
Once upon a time, there was an evil dragon named Bob. He was very evil, and he terrorized the village below the mountain that he lives in. Every year, he came down and would not go away until the villagers gave him a child. The dragon made sure that the kids would not grow up and be warriors that could kill him. So he made them live in his cave with him, and he would not let them come out until they were very old and wrinkly so that they would not be a threat anymore. But the villagers found out what he was doing. The king held a competition to see who was the bravest of them all to rescue all the children and slay the dragon. All the villagers participated, but only 2 prevailed. Those 2 would have a duel, and the winner would be the dragon hunter. I'm going to win because I have had years of practice sword fighting, and you are just a small child. You cannot beat me, the first challenger boasted. We'll see about that soon enough, won't we? Said the small boy confidently. And so they fought, and the small boy quickly swept the opponent's feet, and he fell over. The boy pointed his sword at the first challenger's throat, and the king's guards blew their trumpets. Their boy had won. First, the boy had to climb to the tip-top of the mountain, slay the dragon, and save the day. Doesn't sound too hard, the boy thought, but when the boy reached the top of the mountain, he realized how high up he was and was frightened, but then quickly remembered his goal and kept going to the mouth of the cave. He took a deep breath and walked inside. The dragon was sleeping in the corner of the cave, and in the other corner was a cage full of children. The boy ran up to the dragon and shouted, "You killed my father, the last adventurer, and now I will get my revenge." And the small boy slit the dragon's throat and freed all the villagers. When he got back down to the village, carrying the dragon's head, all the villagers cheered, and the boy went to a small cottage and was mourning his father's death. When he thought he heard his father's voice, He opened up the cellar door and found his father in a chair, surrounded by bits of food. "Dad," the boy shouted excitedly, "you're alive!" The boy was so happy that his dad was alive, and the small boy really thought that there was a happy ending. The end.
An evil dragon named Bob. We've had dragons, we've had dwarves, a lot of slaying. We've had fish-eating ducks, cupcake-hungry parrots, and next, an appeal. Braden Marker, fifth grader at Alexander Elementary, will read his piece, Why the Bakken Pipeline Should Be Stopped. Braden?
Why the Bakken Pipeline should be stopped. I believe the Bakken Pipeline should be stopped. If you're curious as to why, then just wait and I'll explain. In this informational text, I'll teach you about the Bakken Pipeline, or North Dakota Access Pipeline, why it should be stopped, and an example of the reason it needs to be stopped. If you don't know what the Bakken Pipeline is, then here you are. The Bakken Pipeline is an oil pipeline that is planned to go through the Native Americans' land up by North Dakota. Simple as that. Now, let's get started. The Bakken Pipeline runs through American Indian Territory where we Americans in our government promised we wouldn't touch. In this area, there are ancient burial grounds that oil could potentially damage if the pipeline were to leak, which is known to happen. In addition, if the pipeline were to leak, it would infect their water source, which in retrospect could critically harm them and or any locals in the area. According to Wikipedia, on May 21st, 2009, a pipeline in Superior, Wisconsin leaked. It spilled an estimated 6,500 gallons of oil, and about 700 cubic yards of oil-infected dirt had to be extracted because of the possibility of harm to the environment. That's insane. That just goes to show how terrible oil leaks could be and how harmful the oil truly is when it leaks. I think the Bakken Pipeline could be harmful to the Native Americans and their territory. Therefore, it is not right to forcefully dig up their land and build an oil pipeline. Even if we did build it to travel oil over a long distance, there would still be a possibility of leaking oil, making this counterproductive. That's why I think it should be stopped. In order to help these Native Americans and others involved, you could protest against the pipeline. But if you can't protest like most people, you could also help spread the word about the pipeline and get more people involved in the project. Your contribution could help dramatically, no matter how small it is. I hope this informational text taught you about the Bakken Pipeline and helped you realize how dangerous it could potentially be to the environment.
And we are halfway through. So thank you, Joe, for helping us with the introductions, and thank you to those 11 amazing readers. So now I would like to ask our next group of 11, I guess our last group of 11 as well, to come up and take the seats next to the stage so we can begin our second process of the student readers. And next up to help us introduce our young authors is Sarah McGurk, who is a teaching fellow with the Iowa Youth Writing Project. Sarah, if you could join me on stage.
So this is my very first one book, two book banquet. Is that true for many of you? Yeah, a little bit? I'm kind of nervous to be on stage with you amazing authors right now. I got the chance to get a little sneak peek at all of the stories for tonight. So, I just want to let you guys know it's going to get better if you thought it already was really good. So the very first reader we have for this second half is Juliana Moscardo, a sixth grader at Weber Elementary, and she'll read her piece called Grandma Baba.
Grandma Baba. Every summer, my parents head on their anniversary journey, which leaves my 9-year-old stubborn sister Olivia and me at Grandma Baba's. My parents would stuff our bags with clothes and electronics. We arrive at her beautiful red brick cottage with her marvelous stalks of golden sunflowers towering around the sidewalks to the entry. As normal, when we reach her home, my mother complains that Grandma Baba hadn't taken her advice to renovate the entrance and get rid of the sunflowers. Our mother asks if we concur. She eyes us with her deep navy eyes and her eyelashes painted with coal black mascara. Sure, Olivia shrugs. Whatever you think, honey, Dad admits, but I just slip into my seat. Baba's cottage isn't ugly. It's wonderful and mystical. Our parents drop us off, talk to Baba, take in our suitcases, and leave. Naturally, Olivia carries her iPhone and headphones to our bedroom and does her normal routine, just playing games on her iPhone. What would you like to bake, Chloe? Baba questions me as we enter his snow-white kitchen. Could we make your homemade blueberry muffins? I requested. Of course, Baba agrees. Frosting? Nah, I say. Your muffins are better without frosting. Well then, let's get cracking. Baba opens the nice cool fridge and we start cooking. Baba allows me to stir the eggs, flour, and sugar. How old are you now, Chloe? Baba would ask. 6, I show her with my nubby fingers. This much. That's great. She would smile at me and I would smile back at her. After we finish mixing it up and put it in Baba's double oven, I'm covered from head to toe with flour. Come on, Baba carries me to the bathroom. You look like a ghost. Baba fills the tub with fresh water. She makes the water not too hot, not too cold. Perfect. Baba puts the pink bubbles into the tub and I can't even see my toes. When I'm done with my bath, Baba wraps her white fluffy towel around my cold, wet skin and dries me off. Then it's time for bed. I sleep with Olivia, but she's too busy playing on her iPhone. The brightness makes my eyes hurt. I crawl out of the nicely quilted bedspread and walk down the hallway to Baba's bedroom. I tell her I can't sleep. She lets me sleep with her for the rest of the night. I miss that. 5 years after that adventure, Baba passed away. My whole family never talked about anything at the dinner table. It was too quiet without Baba. One summer, Mom and I started cleaning out Baba's attic. Baba's attic was full of cardboard boxes containing lots of unusual objects. I was going through one of her boxes when I found an old note card. The card was so smooth and beaten it felt like fabric. I dusted off the dust and squinted at the letters. It was Baba's blueberry muffins recipe.
So in Juliana's story, we brought somewhere familiar, but also very mystical. And in the end, not only is it kind of a heartbreaker, but it's also a very nice critique of technology in the iPhone, right? Next up, we have Abby McNeely, a 6th grader at Garner Elementary, and she'll read her piece, Finding the Light.
Finding the light. I crushed my growling stomach. Why did life have to be like this? I thought miserably as I lay on the sun-baked ground. Night had fallen, providing a short relief for the blazing sun, but the air was still warm. Mother lay beside me. We had always come up with enough food to survive, but since the drought, it was extremely hard to get something to eat. All of our crops had withered and died, despite our desperate attempts to keep them alive. I felt Mother's arms wrap around me and pull me close. Mom, I asked softly. Yes, Imani, she said. I love you, I said, glancing at her. A tear ran down her cheek. I love you too, honey, she whispered. I decided to get some rest and close my eyes. I drifted in and out of sleep. When I woke, the sun was beating down on me. Mom, I said and shook her softly. She didn't get up. Mom, I said loudly. No response. I felt her chest, and my heart stopped. No, I whispered, but words failed me. My mother was dead. I bent over her and sobbed. It was all too much, but my mother's death seemed to light a fire inside me. I was determined to survive. I walked until I reached a village. For days I tried to get money for food. I offered to do work, but no one needed me. I searched for plants or anything that was edible, but there was nothing growing on the hot, barren terrain, and there wasn't a drop of water in sight. Finally, I gave up. Hope was lost, and without my mother there with me, there was nothing left to live for. Grief-stricken, I wandered aimlessly until the sunset, and I was too weak to walk. I crumpled to the ground and cried. What would I do now? I was so hungry. My eyes slowly drifted shut. My last wish was that others would not die the way that I would. Suddenly, I was rising into warmth and light. Was this a dream? I didn't think so. I soared through the sky. Once I touched the clouds, I saw a paradise. A huge green landscape stretched out as far as I could see. There wasn't a patch of land that wasn't covered in thick, soft grass. A sparkling lake lay to my left, surrounded in trees. Swans glided peacefully across the water. The sun shined, and for the first time I enjoyed its warmth. There were a lot of people here, enjoying this strange place. People swam in the lake, sat under the shade of trees, and strolled across the grass. People were smiling and laughing. I wandered around for a while, taking in everything. Suddenly I saw my mother. Were my eyes playing tricks on me? She was talking with some others. She turned and saw me. Joyful tears welled in her eyes. I ran to her and jumped into her arms. "I missed you so much," I whispered. "Not as much as I missed you," she said softly. When she released me, I saw something I hadn't seen before. It was a huge table loaded with food. Corn, rice, meat, stews, loaves of bread, fish, and other foods I didn't even know the names of. My mouth watered. Mother smiled and said, "Hungry?" We sat down. I ate and drank. There was so much love here. What was this wonderful place? Then suddenly I knew I was in heaven.
With the Iowa Youth Writing Project, I get to work with kids K through 12 every day, and they really will surprise you with how imaginative they can be and how emotional they can go. So in this story, our main character is at, sort of the depth of despair and total hopelessness, and we're sort of reminded as she rises up that hope is the thing with feathers, right? So our next reader is Violet Mowry, a 6th grader at Longfellow Elementary, and he'll read his poem, it's a piece, Home on the Road.
The snow layers on the ground, making the sidewalk slippery. I rush for the falling flakes, feet crunching on the snow as I approach the front of the school, where my 7-year-old sister, Lavinia, waits. She marches, grinning, down the front steps amongst the crowd of 1st and 2nd graders. Her hands are in the air and her tongue is out. I don't have the heart to tell her that her hair looks like it hasn't been combed in days. "Isn't this awesome?" she laughs, examining intricate snowflake patterns. She spins around, her arms raised to the sky. It is wonderful to have snow here in California instead of just rain and fog. Lavinia skips ahead while I lollygag behind. Then she pauses, face dressed in a worried expression. "The car's going to be completely covered," she cries. I run after her to Westport Auto Wash's parking lot, where a car draped in snow is sitting patiently. I still remember that day when Mom and Dad fought so hard when Mom took me and Livy and drove away. She didn't have enough money on her own to rent an apartment. We brushed the snow off the food crate we left outside the night before, and I fished the car key out of my pocket. Safely inside, I turn on the defroster and set the frozen food crate near the fence to heat up. That's when we see the note. "Can you go to the laundromat?" Mom wrote. Lavinia and I shrug at each other and leave the toasty car. Carrying the bag of clothes, Lavinia follows me to the laundromat, where I give Lavinia the quarters to put in the token slot. Lavinia loves that part. While we're waiting for the clothes to dry, I sit at the window seat in the front, where Lavinia watches the clothes spinning around and around. I stare at the passerby and wonder what kinds of houses they live in. Could any of them live in cars, like me, Mom, and Lavinia? Then we see the man eating shrimp cocktail at the fancy place across the street. Is that him? "Lavinia!" I cry. She comes to the window and we stare out at him. "That's him," I breathe. We rush across the street. "Dad!" we cry. "Girls?" "Yes," we say, wrapping him in a tight hug.
It's also my favorite part, going to the laundromat, just putting the coins in, anytime you're playing games. Our next reader is going to be Alan Nass, a 3rd grader at Hills Elementary, and he'll read his piece, My Life in Fishing So Far.
One time I caught a catfish. Here's the story. I was going bass fishing. I caught a frog on the shore by the boat ramp. I used it for bait. It was as big as my hand, and so was the hook. We sat in the boat for 2 hours. After an hour, I got bored and fished with a lure for 30 minutes. Then I switched back to the frog. It really stunk like fish guts. I noticed my trout pole had moved across the boat, but it happened slowly. I almost fell in the water, but my sister grabbed it. She had freaky fast reflexes. It really set off the drag. The drag made a squeaky noise. I could reel it in fine, but I was afraid it would break the line. The line is like a rubber band. You stretch it too far, it breaks. The catfish was 2 feet long. We cleaned it, took it home, and cooked it in the boiler. It tasted good, even though it was a little big, and the catfish are bottom feeders. The older they get, they taste mucky. Another day, I woke up at 5 a.m., got dressed, got worms, a bucket, and a pole. I went to my grandma's lake, caught a bluegill at 5:20 a.m. It was about 8 inches long. 8 inches. Then a largemouth bass that was 14 inches at 1:30 p.m. After that, I caught a smallmouth bass that was 17 inches at 7:30 p.m. Just weeks before my birthday, we were fishing at Volga Lake. Where am I? We were fishing the lake and we didn't catch anything, so we fished the Volga Lake spillway. My grandpa had just bought me a new fishing pole. It was a great ugly pole that had a little hole in the bottom by the reel so you can hook your line down there. It also had a button that you could pull a little and it would adjust the drag. When you cast it, it makes it so you could reel backward like I was just casting. But when it reels backward, it doesn't have any drag. I was fishing with stink bait. I reeled in my pole and about 30 minutes later, and the stink bait was gone. My sister caught a big chub on her pole. It was dead and sat in the sun for a while, so it smelled bad. I let it sit in the sun for a little more, and while I was doing that, I used a chub that my sister caught out of a neighbor's creek. I reeled that pole in about 30 minutes later, and it had nothing, but my other pole had a dead frog on it. It had moved, and whatever it ate, and whatever it was, it ate dead stuff. So I knew it was either a catfish or a bullhead, which is very rare. I had caught a bullhead. I reeled in my other pole, and it had no fish, but no bait either. So I put on my sister's big chub, and waiting for about 30 minutes, I started reeling in my pole. It felt and looked like a rock. It was a snapping turtle, my very first snapping turtle. I was so happy. The snapping turtle was about 2.5 feet long and camouflage colored because it had algae on it. The end.
You know, fishing is a lot like life, right? So, sometimes you come up with a dead thing, and sometimes a bullhead, and sometimes a bullfrog, Alan, where's the best place to go fishing around here?
We used to go there, but it's flooded. It's underwater.
It's underwater.
So you can't go there anymore.
And sometimes, the whole thing goes underwater, so. Next up, we have Alanco, Puerto Rico, a 6th grader from Wood Elementary, and he will read his piece, Space.
Space is fascinating. Deep space, outer space, or just space. It's a vast area of numerous forms of objects, such as supernovas, nebulas, black holes, stars, comets, asteroids, planets, and many versions of these various sections of our galaxy and other galaxies also. There are various spaces that lead to space. and I will name them one by one, starting with the troposphere. The troposphere is the lowest part of the Earth's atmosphere and contains 75% of Earth's atmosphere. The next layer is the stratosphere, which contains the Earth's ozone layer. It also doesn't have any clouds and is favored by pilots around Earth. The final layer is the mesosphere, the layer where most meteors burn up upon atmospheric entrance. It is too high above Earth to be accessible to jet-powered aircrafts and balloons, and too low to permit orbital spacecrafts. Next, we'll talk about the phenomenon that started the universe around us. The Big Bang happened about 13.8 billion years ago. The Big Bang happened when the universe expanded from a very hot and dense state, but after 380,000 years, the universe cooled down, which then allowed subatomic particles and later simple atoms to be created. Giant clouds of these elements later came together through gravity, eventually forming the stars and galaxies visible today. Gravity collapses in a gas. A star is a sphere of plasma held together by its own gravity. A star is formed when gravity collapses in a gas-filled nebula composed of hydrogen, helium, and other heavier elements. When the star becomes dense, hydrogen converts into helium through fusion, releasing energy in the process. After several years, the star grows, becoming a red giant, and after a few more years, a black hole. Now I'll talk about comets and asteroids. A comet is an icy small body that, when passing close to our sun, heats up and releases gas, displaying a visible atmosphere and sometimes a tail. Halley's Comet is one of the most well-known comets around the world. It appears almost every 75 to 76 years. The last sighting of the comet was in 1986, and it will reappear in 2061. It is also the only comet that is visible with the unaided eye. Asteroids are small planets. The larger ones are called planetoids. 4 Vesta is the only asteroid which is visible with the unaided eye from Earth due to the fact that it has a reflective surface. In space, in the vast area known as space. There's so many things in space that I can't list them all in this story. I would have to write another story to list all of the other facts I know about space.
So in that ending, Alanko does promise us another story. And I think that now we have these 7 new planets, right? Alanko, you going to write one about the 7 new planets? Yeah? Oh, yeah. Just doesn't skip a beat. He's like, yeah, I'm on it. So our next reader is Mary Kate Pugh, a 6th grader at Regina Elementary. And she'll read her poem, Winter.
Winter. Winter wonderland, a breathtaking sight, cold and dangerous, yet so beautiful. A blank blanket, sparkling, pure, white, covering the land so precisely. Tiny perfect jewels falling peacefully to their destination. Silent, soft, weightless. Children playing happily. Joyous laughter fills the frigid air. Excitement fills the people's hearts. Winter wonderland, a breathtaking experience.
That's a perfect piece for tonight, right? Now that it's kind of snow raining, you know? Our next reader is Pernille Rastoki, a 3rd grader at Wickham Elementary, and he'll read his piece, The Magic Flag.
The Magic Flag. Trent liked to collect flags. He was waiting for show and tell on the last day of school. He had it ready, his unique flag collection of 36 countries, including the beautiful United States of America. He stood up nervously in front of the class to tell everybody which flag belonged to which country. When he got back home, he carefully put away the flags in his collection box, taking special care with the United States flag. It was given to him by his grandpa Larry, who had bought it in 1969, the same year the first American man, Neil Armstrong, had landed on the moon. The next morning, Trent ate his breakfast and read the newspaper. Screaming headlines on the first page caught his eye. Moon space station in danger. Possible end of American scientific mission to the moon. Nuclear battery malfunction in the power plant at the American base on the moon. According to the report, if the nuclear battery exploded, not only would the base become useless, but there could be radiation fallout harming life on Earth. This needed to be stopped. However, the quickest repair crew would be able to reach the surface of the moon to fix this disaster would be at least 1 month. Trent was thinking about this with his grandpa's flag in his hand. As he pulled on the strings of the flag, he heard a loud whoosh, and suddenly everything went dark in front of his eyes. When he opened them again, he found himself standing on the moon in a spacesuit. Isn't the moon supposed to have zero gravity? He tried a daring jump and found himself launched in the air several feet, much to his surprise. Am I dreaming? Then he suddenly remembered the news about the nuclear battery. As he was jumping around, he spotted a series of metal bunkers leading towards a shallow hill with a metal door on its side. That's gotta be where the nuclear battery is. As he approached it nervously, he opened the metal door and stepped inside. To his surprise, inside was a jumbled mess of hundreds of wires and circuit breakers of all colors running in several directions. I'm never going to be able to figure this out by myself, but he pushed the big mess of wires to the side and continued inside. On the back wall, he saw a control panel with 3 buttons. This looks exactly like the panel in the Super Mario game, he thought. There was a red button that said stop, a green button that said start, and an orange button that said transfer power. He pressed the red button. Immediately, the nuclear battery countdown stopped. Phew! He took a sigh of relief. As he began backing out of the battery chamber, he tripped over one of the wires. He fell down and everything went dark before his eyes. Trent, wake up, wake up. It will be late. You will be late. We have to go to the magic show. He heard his brother's voice calling him. He opened his eyes carefully and looked around. The walls and posters all looked familiar, so did those flags. Gasp, he was back in his room. Well, that was quite a dream. He got ready and began to head out with his family. Next morning, he quickly read the newspaper and saw the headlines. Disaster averted. Battery functions again. Moon Space Station will continue to work despite recent battery malfunction for several more years. Power has been surprisingly restored without any help. He couldn't believe his eyes. Did he really dream, or was it all real? Well, that is for Trent to know and us to guess.
So I'm sure we all love the Super Mario reference, right? But I like the little slip in. They're like, Trent, you're going to be late for the magic show, right? So like, Trent's a magician. You know, we all believe it. Next up, we have Evian Smith, 5th grader at Lemmy Elementary, and she'll read her piece, Mischief Managed.
"12:05 a.m. NYPD. My name is Thorns, Marion Thorns, female detective for NYPD. Marion, you have an assignment around the corner on 3rd Avenue East," yelled Billy. Oh yeah, that's my partner, Billy Young. He got recruited last year as a ride-along detective. I've been here for 13 years. Believe it or not, I started this job when I was 13. I was the best one for the job, even though back then it was called an internship. Marion, are you coming? Asked Corey Jones, almost out of breath, with his hands in his pockets. He's the police officer and also my dream future husband. He's just one spot ahead of me for getting the spot of chief, but whatever, he's still dreaming. Let's go, said Billy, grabbing my keys off my desk. So demanding. Sheesh. Get the car ready. We're going to the crime scene. Let's roll, I demanded to Billy. 12:15 a.m., 754 3rd Avenue, scene of the crime. What's the case? I said to the forensic. It's like this man died of a chemical in the air around inside of this house. The forensic stated. I don't know how this could happen. I asked for more info about the man from the police. It states that this man is 37 years old with no record of criminal activity. Well, do you have any suspects yet? I demanded to the police. Not yet, Miss Lawrence. We are sorry and we will keep looking, an officer said. Good, keep looking. I snapped and turned to leave. 12:35 a.m., NYPD. I went back to the office to do some more research on the man. I looked online and called the realtor who sold the house to this deceased man 13 years ago. She said that this man's was Norman Lawrence Parker. I also know that back at the crime scene, the forensics stated that the murder happened at midnight, but I'm still questioning why midnight. I said to myself. I called Billy down to the office because I think I figured out who committed the crime. 1 o'clock a.m., NYPD. Corey Jones, I said. Yeah, what about him? Billy asked, confused. He committed the crime. Hear me out. He came into the office at 12:10, 10 minutes after the murder. He was out of breath with his hands in his pockets, and when he called me, he knew the man's name before I could tell anyone. Call him into the interrogation room now. So, do we have a suspect you want me to interview? Asked Corey Jones, confused when he entered. Yeah, you. You are a suspect for the Parker murder, I replied in a brave tone. I handed him the paper of all my proof that says he killed Norman. In your pockets, you had the leftover chemical. That's why you wanted to leave quickly, to get rid of him. Lock him up, boys. But why would he do such a thing? He would never do such a thing.
So we have a correction on that last story. It's not mischief managed. It's 12:05 a.m. NYPD, which I think makes a lot of sense. Evian, have you done some work with the NYPD or the Iowa City Police? You definitely know exactly how it works. Yeah? Yeah, just some stuff on the job. Yeah. So our next reader is Charlotte Windmill, a 6th grader at Kirkwood Elementary, and she will read her piece, The Girl with 100 Tattoos.
Imagine if you had one tattoo that described your personality. Imagine if everyone had them and were born with them. Now imagine if whenever one person fell in love with someone, that person's tattoo would appear on the other person's body. I live in this world. I see people with more than 20 tattoos and some with just 2. I see little boys and girls in schoolyards talking about how many tattoos they want to get when they grow older. And with the older children, I hear them bragging about how they got a second tattoo or gossiping about how they saw their tattoo on their crush's arm. And then I see the impressionable people who fall in love easily. There are more than 50 tattoos on most, but there's one girl that stands out from the rest. I see her often. She sits alone and she seems to pick her fingers a lot. She doesn't talk much and she wears many layers, even in summer. She is the girl with exactly 100 tattoos. I talked to her once, emphasis on once. She told me that she didn't want to be this way. She told me that she didn't like how her skin looked anymore. I wasn't quite sure, but I think she was crying. That was 3 years ago. I walk outside and see her waiting for me at the bus stop, waving. You're late, she teases once I reach the bus stop. I playfully punch her arm. You're the one who woke up at 11:30 yesterday, I tease back. As the bus arrives and we take a seat, I think about how far this girl next to me has come. Not to be narcissistic, but I think I'm the reason she got here in the first place. She used to be so reserved, so silent, but now, after I started to sit down and actually speak to her, she's more outgoing and friendly than ever. It's funny, really. 3 years ago, she was only considered an acquaintance for a while, then a friend later. I didn't even know her actual name until about a year ago. Madeline. I look up from my thoughts to see Madeline rummaging through her daisy-printed handbag, pulling out 2 handmade bracelets. I almost forgot. She smiles and hands a bracelet to me. This is for being a friend. As I slip the bracelet on, the bus slowing to our stop, I smile back at Madeline, the girl with 100 tattoos.
Wow, what a twist on judging a book by its cover. And, imagine what kind of world that would be if every time we loved something, we had a tattoo. It's amazing. Our next reader is Alex Shue, a 4th grader at Lincoln Elementary, and he'll read a poem, A Kid in a Park.
A bright summer day, Yellowstone, here I come. 1916 to 2016, 100 years of national pride. Snowy mountaintops, rainbow hot springs, burned trees, fresh greens, old faithful, new fans, roaming bison, jumping deer, Mr. Coyote, Mrs. Bear, chipmunk, Chee-Chee, waterfalls laughing, fishing, boating, horseback riding. I want one more day.
I write poems, I can't write fiction. That was awesome. I read it on the page, but then he came up and he was just like, Sonics, pacing, here we go. Wild. This is our very last reader, Eleanor Zier. She's a 4th grader at Shimmick Elementary, and she'll read her piece, Uninvited Guest.
The car halted to a stop. I got out and stared at the house in front of me. My mom, dad, dog, and I had moved from Denver, Colorado to Louisiana. Looking at the dump of a house in front of me, I missed Colorado already. I remembered what my mom had said about giving Louisiana a chance, but I knew I would never like it here. The house was a wreck, the town was poor, and the whole place gave me the creeps. I took some boxes downstairs. The whole basement was empty. It was just empty brick walls. There wasn't even a window. I set the boxes down and went up to my new room. My dad helped me put up my bed and I went to sleep. I missed my home so much, my friends, my school, and my house. Before I knew it, I was surrounded by darkness. I woke up to the sound of voices in my head, and they didn't sound like friendly voices either. I went downstairs where I thought they were coming from and saw a small door about the size of a guitar where the empty wall had been. The voices seemed to be coming from the other side of the door. My heart was pounding as if it was going to jump out of my chest. I wanted to run upstairs, but my feet seemed stuck to the floor. Finally, I forced myself to walk toward the stairs, but before I got very far, I heard a voice say, "I think we will be seeing her soon." The next morning, I ran into my mom and dad's room and dragged them downstairs. "Where are we going?" my mom asked in confusion. I didn't answer and just kept running. When we got downstairs, I stared in shock at the blank wall. But I stammered, "It was right here." My parents looked at each other confused. "Taylor," my mom said, "there's nothing there." Without answering, I ran upstairs. "I'm going for a walk," I yelled from the top of the stairs. I grabbed my coat and rushed out the door. The swaying trees lured me deeper and deeper into the woods. Suddenly I heard the voices, the same ones from the night before, except I heard another one. It was sweeter than the other two. Two of them told me to go deeper into the woods. The other one told me to go home. I walked home confused. That night I went downstairs, not entirely sure what I was doing. I went over to the door and put my ear against it. I could hear the voices, just not very clearly. I looked down and saw a little sheet of paper, mostly covered in dirt. It said in very faint writing, "If you don't find us, we will find you." I opened the door and crawled in. After what seemed like forever, I saw a red little glow. I got closer and found myself in a little room. Suddenly I saw two red lights and one blue light. "Run," the blue light seemed to say. The red lights came closer and closer. I felt a weird, tingly feeling. I felt I was starting to change. Then I saw the red lights were wrapped around me. "Run, Taylor," the blue light said again. I twisted and turned, and finally I broke free. Then the blue light said something I didn't really understand. "Get the stone." I looked around confused, but then I saw it. A glimmering stone the red lights were guarding. I ran over, dodged the lights, and dodged the lights. With the stone in my hand, I ran toward the door. I got out just in time. Breathing very hard, I turned around, but the door was gone. More tired than ever, I went to bed. Next morning, I woke up and went outside. There was someone waiting for me in the yard. She had pale skin, gray eyes, and dark hair. "Thank you for saving my life last night," she said very quietly, and with that, she was gone.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Sarah, for helping us to introduce our student readers. And thank you again to all of our students' readers. Let's have one big round of applause for all of them. So as I often say at this event, a lot of people ask me about what the future of the City of Literature is going to be, and I think it's in pretty good hands. So thank you to you guys. So we're very excited about our keynote presenter this evening. Gene Luen Yang was named the National Ambassador for Young People's Literature in 2016, and shortly after that, his publisher put out word that he would be doing a few events around the country in that role and asked for proposals. We jumped at the chance, telling them that Gene had to come to One Book, Two Book. His goals in this new role and our goals with this festival are very closely aligned. I hope Gene agrees with that now, having seen today. Gene began making comics and graphic novels in the 5th grade. In 2006, his book, American Born Chinese, was published by First Second Books. It became the first graphic novel to be nominated for a National Book Award and the first to win the American Library Association's Prince Award. It also won an Eisner Award for Best Graphic Album. In 2013, First Second Books released Boxers and Saints, his 2-volume graphic novel about the Boxer Rebellion. Boxers and Saints was nominated for a National Book Award and won the LA Times Book Prize. Gene has done a number of other comics, including Dark Horse Comics' continuation of the popular Nickelodeon cartoon Avatar: The Last Airbender, as well as DC Comics' Superman. In addition to cartooning, Gene teaches creative writing through Hamline University's MFA in Writing for Children and Young Adults. Please help me welcome Gene Luen Yang to the stage.
I can't tell you how thrilled I am to be here to share the stage with such amazing talent. I gotta tell you, listening to all those pieces of writing was incredibly inspiring to me. It inspired me to tell my own stories. It also inspired me to try pouring some maple syrup on a cat. I really want to see what happens. Now, my name is Gene. This is what I look like in real life. That is what I look like as a cartoon. Nowadays, I have 2 different jobs, and what I want to tell you about tonight is how I got these 2 jobs. The first is I am a cartoonist, which means I write and draw comic books and graphic novels. Comics and I go back. We go way back. This right here is a picture of me when I was about 3 years old. It is probably the cutest picture of me ever taken. After this, it was a little bit downhill. Now, my parents are both immigrants. My mom was born in mainland China, my dad in Taiwan. They both came to the United States for graduate school. They met, fell in love, got married, and had me. When I was growing up, one of the primary ways that I interacted with my parents was through stories. Both my parents were avid storytellers, and I loved listening to their stories. Most of their stories were from Chinese culture. I think this is true of a lot of immigrant parents. A lot of them will tell stories about the culture that they left to their kids to build that connection between that culture and their children. So I grew up listening to my parents' stories, loving my parents' stories. And I also grew up drawing. My mom tells me that I started drawing when I was 2 years old, and I basically haven't stopped. So naturally, when you take stories and drawing and you add them together, you get animation. Animated movies and animated television, that was the first time I realized I can tell stories by doing drawings. When I was a kid, I loved watching cartoons on TV. I loved going to the theater to watch animated movies. In fact, when I was really young, my life's ambition was to work for this guy right here. When I was in 3rd grade, our teacher made us do these biography reports about famous people. I chose to do mine on Walt Disney, and afterwards, I got kind of obsessed with him. I remember going to the library and checking out as many books about Walt Disney as I could find. I remember practicing drawing in that classic Disney style. I remember looking up an encyclopedia. You kids know what that is? It's like Wikipedia, but it's on paper. So I remember looking up an encyclopedia when he died, because I was hoping the date of his death would be the same as my birth date, because that would mean that I might be his reincarnation. That did not work out. I even went to the poster store. We used to have this poster store at our local mall, and I bought this. I had to special order it. This poster-sized headshot of Walt Disney. Not Disneyland, not any of the Disney characters, just Walt Disney's head. And I put that up in my bedroom. My friends would come over. They'd be like, why do you have this picture of a creepy old man in your bedroom? And I'd have to tell them, that's not just any creepy old man. That was Walt Disney. So I really wanted to be a Disney animator. This changed one night when I was in 5th grade. My mom took me to our local bookstore. They don't really have these anymore, but when I was a kid, almost every local bookstore had what was called a spinner rack. This was a wireframe rack that would carry a month's worth of comics, and you could spin them so that you could see all the comics. On this one night in 5th grade, I saw this issue of Marvel 2-in-1 sitting on that spinner rack, and as soon as I saw this cover, I knew I needed to own this comic. These two characters just looked way too awesome, right? I wanted to find out everything I could about them. So I brought this issue up to my mom. I said, Mom, from the depths of my being, I need to own this. Will you please buy it for me? And she took one look at this cover and she said, no, absolutely not. Those two characters look way too scary and they're gonna give you nightmares. She had a point, because even though I was in 5th grade, I was actually still getting nightmares. She made me put this back on the spinner rack. To this day, I have no idea what the story's about. I've never read it. But my mom saw how sad I was as I was putting this issue back on that spinner rack, so she wanted to buy me a comic. She bought me this instead. She bought me the latest Superman comic. It's obvious why she chose Superman, right? I was not very happy about this, because in 5th grade, I'm a fan of Superman now, but in 5th grade, I was not. I thought Superman was a pretty boring character. I mean, out of all of the superheroes out there, he is the best behaved. That's why my mom bought this for me. He never says any bad words. He doesn't punch anybody unless he has to, and afterwards he feels all guilty about it. He's like this giant flying Boy Scout in this blue uniform, flying around Metropolis looking for good deeds to do. Well, I was disappointed, but I brought this home and I read it. And in this story, the atomic bomb drops. It kills off most of the people on the planet. And the few survivors that are left, they gather themselves into these little villages. All the police are dead, so it's totally chaotic. A group of men have to get together, dress up in medieval-style armor, and ride around the apocalyptic countryside on these giant mutated dogs to fight crime. They call themselves the Atomic Knights. And Superman, he's Superman, so he's a survivor. He teams up with these Atomic Knights. They have this adventure together. In the last couple of pages, it's revealed that this entire issue is just a dream in somebody's head. But that did not stop this book from freaking me out. I stayed up nights thinking about this, thinking about the atomic bomb, thinking about Superman, thinking about mutated dogs, thinking about comics, thinking about how this combination of drawings on a page and words did something inside of my head that had never been done before. Pretty soon after this, within weeks of reading this comic, I went from being a comic book reader to comic book creator. Those of you who came up here to read, you know this, right? Telling your own stories can be amazing. It can be intoxicating. It can be more fun than almost anything you can do in life. I had this friend in 5th grade. His name was Jeremy Kunyoshi, and we wanted to tell our own stories. We were both comic book geeks. We wanted to make our own comics. So during lunch, when our more athletically capable friends were playing tetherball, we would sit at the lunch tables dreaming up stories. And I would do all the pencils, he would do all the inks. We'd give all of our pages to his mom, who would take them to work with her, wait till all her coworkers went home, and sneak photocopies for us. Then we would take these photocopies, we'd staple them by hand, we sold them to our classmates for 50 cents a piece. We made $8. There were 25 kids in our class. So excluding us, there were 23. 5 of them were jerks. We sold them to everybody else. That's how I got my start in comics, by making and publishing my own stories with Jeremy. Jeremy has since given up on comics. He is now a radiologist. He has a giant house in Hawaii, good for him. But I kept making comics. I kept making comics through the 5th grade, through the 6th grade. Now, in 7th grade, I had this one friend who was just better than me. He was better than me in every way one human being can be better than another. He was better looking, he was taller, he was more athletic, he was smarter, he had better grades. He was in 7th grade, and he had like 6 girlfriends in a row throughout that whole school year, right? That's how awesome he was. Most of us in 7th grade, we couldn't even get one girlfriend. So one day he sees me reading these comics, and he says to me, you know, if you keep reading comic books, you will never get a girlfriend. In 7th grade, from the depths of my being, I knew I wanted a girlfriend. So I took his advice, I gave up comics, I took all of my comics budget, like the allowance that I saved for comics, and I used it on this instead. So this was the 80s. In the 80s, if you wanted to be awesome, you had to buy a denim jacket. Kids, ask your parents about this, it's true. So I used all my comics on a denim jacket. I put on this denim jacket, I went to school, and I waited for the ladies to come. I waited through the 7th grade, through the 8th grade, through the 9th grade. In 10th grade, I looked myself in the mirror and I just had to face facts. I was like, Gene, this girlfriend thing is just not gonna happen. So there I was, I had no girlfriend, I had no comics, and I was like, man, I could do something about one of these things. So I started buying comic books again. And I bought with like this fervor that I just didn't have when I was young. I loved comics in high school. And I have to tell you, in my 11th grade year, after I started avidly collecting comics, I got my first girlfriend. So my friend was wrong. Any of you kids who are like book nerds and comic book nerds who love story, who love fantasy, keep loving that stuff. People who tell you that romance and nerdiness are not compatible are just simply lying to you. That is not the case. So in high school, I was collecting these comics. Now, my parents were really concerned. They sat me down when I was a senior, and they're like, you're about to go to college. You're about to become an adult. Why are you diving back into this habit that you used to have when you were in 5th grade? Well, I eased some of their concerns by getting into college. I went to UC Berkeley. There I majored in computer science and I minored in creative writing. And when I graduated from college, I looked at these decades and decades of adulthood that were just stretched out in front of me. And I was like, I have loved comics for so long. If I do not publish one comic book before I die, I'm gonna die unfulfilled. Nobody wants to die unfulfilled, so I needed to publish a comic. I did not want to wait for a publisher to say yes to me before I was able to put a comic out into the world, so I decided to self-publish. This little thing called the World Wide Web was just getting started. This was the mid-90s. So I went on the web and I started looking up information about how to self-publish my own comic. I came across this foundation called the Xeric Foundation. I'm sure you've all heard of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. The Turtles were created by these 2 guys who were dirt poor. One of them, I think, was living in his mom's basement. They cobbled together a couple $1,000s. They drew the first issue of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. They published it on their own. They self-published it. And within 5 years, the Turtles had become this multi-million-dollar worldwide phenomenon with a television series, with movies, with t-shirts, and with toys. And these 2 guys became millionaires. They became super rich. One of them used all his money and he bought a Sherman tank. And he also bought the Batmobile from the 1989 Tim Burton Batman movie. The other guy took all of his millions of dollars and he founded a nonprofit organization called the Xeric Foundation. So for decades, the Xeric Foundation would give out grants to self-publishing authors, to self-publishing cartoonists. It was the Turtles guy's way of giving back to his roots. Well, I applied to the Xeric Foundation grant and I got it. It was amazing. I still remember the day that I found out. I went to my mailbox and I opened it up and I pulled out this tiny little letter from the Xeric Foundation and I thought, man, because I thought it was gonna be like college acceptances, right? When you're applying for colleges, you get a little envelope back, that means bad news. But I opened this tiny little envelope and I found out I was gonna get all this Turtles money to put out my own comic. It was awesome. It was better than getting a girlfriend. That's how awesome it was. So with this Turtles money, I put out Gordon Yamamoto and the King of the Geeks #1. This was my first self-published comic. It was a thrill to do, but it was not very profitable. I took $3,000 of that Turtles money to put this out into the world. I made maybe $700 of it back. My parents, meanwhile, watched me do this, and they were tolerant. They said to me, you know, you have had this whole comics obsession for a while now. It is good for you to get it out of your system so that you can become a normal adult. Unfortunately for them, it did not get out of my system. I loved the process of creating and publishing my own comics, so I wanted to do it again. Over the next year, I did Gordon Yamamoto and the King of the Geeks #2, and then the year after that, I did Gordon Yamamoto and the King of the Geeks #3. I kept making comics throughout my 20s. As my parents watched me do this, they got really annoyed. They said, you are in your mid-20s, you are now actually legally an adult. Why are you doing this thing that you used to do with Jeremy? And didn't we hear that Jeremy is now in med school? But I kept doing it. I kept doing it. And 10 years after I put out Gordon Yamamoto and the King of the Geeks, I got signed with my current publisher, First Second Books. And they put out my very first full-color graphic novel called American Born Chinese. I have to say that the response to American Born Chinese was absolutely overwhelming. I was shocked. I was shocked at how well received it was by librarians, by teachers, by comic book fans. The support that people gave to American Born Chinese was absolutely life-changing. It was completely shocking. I was shocked, but I was not as shocked as my parents. When I told my parents what was happening with American Born Chinese, they just couldn't believe it. They're like, people are actually reading your drawings? That makes no sense. I have been lucky enough that I have been publishing with First Second Books ever since. I've put out a bunch of different books with them. Here are just some of them. And about 5 years ago, I started branching out. I got invited to work with a few other publishers. A company called Dark Horse Comics invited me to work on these books right here. How many of you have ever seen this show called Avatar: The Last Airbender? Okay, a bunch of you. Now, if you didn't raise your hand, you should feel a little bit ashamed. Because this is, to my mind, the best American animated series ever. It ran on Nickelodeon from 2005 to 2008. After it went off the air, Nickelodeon decided to continue the adventures as a graphic novel. So one of the editors at Dark Horse, which acquired the license to do these comics, called me up. She asked me if I would be willing to write these for them, and I jumped at the chance because I am a huge Avatar fan. Like I said, I've been working on these books for about 5 years now, and the best part of this gig is I get to call Mike DiMartino and Brian Konietzko, the two animators who created the original show. And they totally call me back. It's awesome. It's like we're BFFs. Then 2 years ago, I got a call from DC Comics, the publishers of Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman, and they offered me the chance to work on their flagship character, the character who was the main character in the very first issue of comics that I ever read. They offered me the chance to write Superman. By now, I had become a Superman fan. And I, again, jumped at this chance. The best part of this gig is I got to work with an artist by the name of John Romita Jr. John Romita Jr. is a pretty famous superhero comic book artist. In the 80s and 90s, he made a name for himself working for Marvel. He did these long, legendary runs on Avengers, on X-Men, and on Daredevil. When I was in high school, I used to go to comic book conventions and line up to get John Romita Jr.'s autograph. Now, he and I have gotten a chance to work on Superman. Life is just really weird sometimes. Well, I remember the month that my first issue of Superman came out, I got a box of them. I got a box of copies about a week before they were going to be out in comic book stores. And I pulled one out, I drove over to my parents' house, and I handed it to my dad. My dad knows how much I have loved superhero comics since I was little. So when he was holding that issue of Superman 41 in his hand, the issue that I wrote, he told me that he was happy for me. So this wasn't just how I became a full-time cartoonist, this is also how I finally managed to please my immigrant father. So that is my first job. I'm a cartoonist. My second job, I just got 2 Januaries ago. 2 Januaries ago, I was invited by the Library of Congress, by Every Child a Reader, and the Children's Book Council to the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. They had this fancy ceremony for me. I had to wear a fancy suit, and they gave me a fancy medal. So this is the way the medal looks as a cartoon, and here is how it looks in real life. I like to show off my bling, so I'm going to put it on right now. They named me the 5th National Ambassador for Young People's Literature. Out of all the job titles that I've ever had, this is the one with the most syllables. So this is the one that I am most excited about. The National Ambassador position got started in 2008, so it's not a very old position. It's relatively new. Every ambassador has a 2-year term. And when I found out that this was going to happen, I was just absolutely flabbergasted. The point of the National Ambassador is to promote reading. We want to get both more kids reading and kids reading more. And that's why it's such a thrill to be at this festival, right? Because that's what you all are here for. You all are here to get more kids reading and kids reading more. Every ambassador picks a platform, which means they pick some area that they want to focus their energy in. And my platform is something that I call Reading Without Walls. By reading without walls, I mean I want our kids, all of us really, to read outside of our comfort zones. I want us to explore the world through reading. I want us to read books that we wouldn't normally read, that other people might not think we would even like. And specifically, I have been going around the nation issuing this specific challenge. I want kids to set a due date for themselves, or school communities can do this, or libraries can do this. I want you to set a due date for yourself, and by that due date, I want you to do at least one of 3 things. Number 1, I want you to read a book about a character who doesn't look like you or live like you. Number 2, I want you to read a book about a topic that you might not know much about, that you might even find intimidating. Number 3, I want you to read a book in a format that you don't normally read for fun. If normally all you read for fun are chapter books, I want you to try a book in verse, a book of poetry, or a comic book. If normally all you read are comic books and graphic novels, I want you to try a book with no pictures in it. And if you really want to go for the gold star, try to find one book that fits all 3 of these criteria. Read without walls and see what happens. The Library of Congress and Children's Book Council have gotten behind this initiative 100%. So this April, we are doing this big rollout. We are trying to get school communities and libraries all over the nation to adopt this as their summer reading program. If you are a librarian or a parent or a teacher and you want more information about this, please visit this particular URL. Now let me end by saying this. I think the reason why festivals like this are so important is because we know stories, we know that books build understanding and empathy between human beings, right? That's one of the primary functions of why human beings as a species tell stories. And we all know that in this day and age, in our world today, we could use a little bit more empathy and we could use a little bit more understanding. So I want to thank you all so much for your commitment and your support for not just our kids, but also the stories that our kids are reading and our kids are telling. Thank you. It looks like we have a few minutes for questions. Does anyone have a question that I can answer? I know it can be about anything. You can ask about Avatar or Superman. Go ahead. How old am I? Okay, so about a year ago, about a month ago, I went to my local supermarket and I got carded for buying beer, and it made me feel so good. That was like the best thing that happened to me all year. I am 43. I have 4 kids at home with my wife. Yeah, she's very patient, which is why I get to be here. Yes, young man. What's the very first book that I wrote? When I was in second grade, I used to keep this little notebook, and it had like little drawings and like just stories in it, you know, and I would try to write in it every day. The very first story that I remember writing was in that notebook, and it was called The Black Dog's Adventure. It was about a black dog who had an adventure. It was not a very good story. Yes, young lady. When did I learn to read? Okay, so I have a confession to make, and the confession is, even though I am the national ambassador, I have always been a slow reader, always. Like at my elementary school, they divided us into two halves, you know, the whole class into two halves, and one was the slow half and one was the fast half. They had like other names for it. I think one was like the blue group and one was the red group, but everybody knew what was up, right? Everybody knew. And I was always in the slow one. I was always in the slow one. And even worse, our teachers used to make us line up by the number of pages we read in a month, right? And I was always either second to last or last. It was me and this other kid just trading places every month. So I've always been slow. But what my mom did with me was she saw that I was a slow reader, and she would sit down with me and she would read every night. She would read to me every night. We would read together. And even though I did not get much faster, to this day I am a slow reader. I learned to love books and I learned to love reading. So I learned when I was in kindergarten, first grade, second grade. Yes? What was your girlfriend's name? What was my very first girlfriend's name? Okay, I'll tell you this. I'm going to tell you about my first crush, and then I'm also going to tell you about my first girlfriend. My first crush was in kindergarten. I liked this girl named Jody Roof. She was super cute. And I told my mom about it. Like, as you get older, you realize that telling your mom can sometimes get awkward. But in kindergarten, I just didn't know. So I told my mom that I had this crush on this girl, and she gave me 2 cupcakes to take to school. She said, you can eat one for snack and give Jody the other one. So I ran up to Jody and I gave her the cupcake. I didn't say anything, I just gave it to her, and then I ran away. And then after lunch, we walk into our classroom, and our teacher is eating the cupcake. And as we're sitting down, he said, thank you, Jody, for this beautiful cupcake. And that was my last interaction ever with, like, I think that was also part of the reason why I gave up on romance for so long. But my first girlfriend, after I started collecting comics, like when I was in the 11th grade, her name was Michelle. She was very pretty, but not as pretty as my wife right now. Yes, all the way in the back. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so I'm gonna do the young man in the greenish teal shirt, and then the other young man. Congratulations, by the way, both of you did awesome jobs. But go ahead. Do I still have a girlfriend? I have a wife. If I had a girlfriend now, it would not be good. It would not be good. It would be terrible. Okay, go on. Yes. How did I get my sense of humor? Well, I'm glad you think I'm funny. I don't think my wife would agree with you. But I'm glad you think I'm funny. My mom especially is a very funny woman. I think I have gone through my life trying to be as funny as my mom. A lot of her jokes I can't tell you right now, though, because there are kids in the room. Go ahead. Have I written any other stories that weren't comics? Well, I did a minor in creative writing when I was in college, and my teacher would not let us write comics. So everything I did for that creative writing minor was not in comics format. I did plays, and then I did prose short stories, and I did memoir. That's everything that I did. But professionally speaking, I have not done anything that has not been comics. Everything I've done has been both words and pictures. Okay, so this sounds like this is gonna be the last one. All right, yes, young lady. How many books did I write? Well, that's the thing. Like when I was writing Superman, it was a monthly comic. So if you count each of those comics as one thing, I've written a lot. But in terms of the number, I've only written and drawn myself 2 books. One is American Born Chinese and one is Boxers and Saints. And then with first, second books, I think I've done 7 so far. But if you count all those issues of Superman, I've done a ton. Once again, thank you so much for inviting me. It was truly a pleasure and an honor to get to talk to you all. Thank you. Thank you.
right, well, thank you very much to Gene. That was a wonderful presentation. I often tell our keynote authors who have to follow all of those student writers what they're in for, and a lot of times they're a little cowed by that, but I think you definitely delivered tonight. So thank you again, Gene. Appreciate it. So I'd like to give one last thank you to our sponsors, the Community Foundation, Jerry and Carolyn, who are here with that fund, ACT, US Bank, and Daydreams Comics, as well as Iowa Public Radio. So I wanted to, for one last thing before we send you off, to let you know, Gene is willing to stick around and talk to folks. So I know we had a couple of kids that had some questions that we didn't have time to get to. And there's a table outside. Prairie Lights, our friends from there, are selling some books, have a lot of Gene's titles there, and I know he'd be happy to autograph those as well. So if you'd like to stick around and meet Gene. And with that, thank you very much for coming out, and hope you enjoyed the evening.